Hazard pay is back on, baby. Hazard pay is in the third stimulus package. But under the HEROES Act in 2020, it was $10,000. Yes. So will you get $10,000 in the third stimulus package? We hope so. It was $10,000 based upon the following calculation. Number of hours you worked from the pandemic start of January 2020 to 60 days after the pandemic ends, which hasn't happened yet, times $13 an hour. And that includes overtime, part-time, full-time, casual time, hard time, any type of hours you worked at work. Now, what would happen with essential workers who are independent contractors? What would happen with essential workers who were laid off or fired or brought back or multiple jobs? Those questions were never particularly well answered. But also what has not been particularly well answered? What is President Joe Biden doing with hazard pay? This week we will potentially see the third stimulus package bill as early as today. Well, tomorrow, Monday, when the House resumes finishing the bill and calling it for a vote. And with that, we'll be ready to pounce as a purple hawk. In this Overnight LA video, I explain how to get hazard pay, the eligibility, who's an essential worker, and more. Enjoy this Overnight LA video on hazard pay. Hazard pay heats up as we near a second stimulus package approval. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is LA Late. Thank you for joining me on Afternoons LA Late, our 2-hour programming block that starts every day at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. It starts with a check and then follows up with hazard pay, FPUC, and rent assistance, a new video every 30 minutes. This one's about hazard pay. If you have not followed this channel, thank you for joining me. Big news overnight that suggests that the stimulus package is closer to approval than even first reported on this channel on Friday. The dynamics of the package are that certain items are approved and other things are still sort of on the table or close or falling by the sidelines. Hazard pay does not appear to be one of them. If you've noticed, in the last 3 days, we've heard not a single word that is negative from neither the president, Steve Mnuchin, or Mark Meadows against hazard pay. What we have had is a lot of great remarks from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who said that they're not agreeing to a stimulus package unless hazard pay is in there. A lot of viewers have asked, well, what's going to happen with hazard pay? Basically, where we are at the moment is it's still tracking the HEROES Act. The HEROES Act and all the dynamics that I've covered with hazard pay is still tracking that language. As you know, the Republicans introduced the HEALS Act on Monday and didn't have much of anything. It was missing just junk left and right. And so we're not really tracking the HEALS Act at this point. We're tracking the HEROES Act because that is where the negotiations have been. Overnight, major negotiations continued, one of the longest negotiation sessions and the most fruitful. The people in the room are Mark Meadows, who AP reports is an unsophisticated negotiator, has no background negotiations whatsoever. He's chief of staff to Donald Trump. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary to Donald Trump, who's never said anything negative about hazard pay, nor is the Trump administration. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, and Chuck Schumer out of New York. And so they've negotiated long hours, and they came out this morning with Chuck Schumer, who's really always the most pessimistic of this group. And he said, there's been a lot of great progress. That was our best session yet, but there's a few things still remaining. Well, what are the few things, Chuck? Hey, Allie, what are the few things? It doesn't appear that hazard pay is one of the few things. It appears that the ridiculous stuff is the few things. The crapo part of the crap bill, the real bad stuff. Oh, I almost cursed there. The real bad stuff. That is the $3 billion federal billing that doesn't belong in a stimulus package bill. The insurance liability provision of Mitch McConnell, which I'll get to in a second, which is just insane. And then there's the really important issue, but can't be settled just yet, is how much money in this stimulus package is going to be given to the states so that they disperse it for hazard pay, they disperse it for rent assistance, they disperse it for a lot of programs. That's separate and apart from the hazard pay I'm getting to in a second. Those seem to be the items that are really not formulated. I told you on Friday, ignore what you hear on Sunday morning news. And sure enough, it was exactly that way. So please just blank it out if you watched it. Just don't come. I heard Steve say this, Ellen. I heard Mark say. No, just ignore it because it's a lot of hogwash. Mark Meadows' most hilarious remark this morning, which I will tell you because I watched it or read it, was he's urging you to call up your politician and demand Nancy and Chuck to give you $200 a week because you're owed $200 a week of FPUC. And how dare they deny you that wonderful $200 a week? No one's calling. Do you hear the phone ringing? I don't hear the phone ringing. No one wants $200 a week, Mr. Meadows. They want $600 a week. They got it last week, and they want to get it this week, and they want to get it next week. So it's that sort of silliness that's coming out of Sunday morning news, which makes it more like, Sunday morning cartoons more than Sunday morning politics. But as to discussions, and you know what I'm about to say, as to discussions, whether it's CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, Fox, whoever you want to list in the group, no one asked a question about hazard pay. I had a very nice person on Twitter tweet me, I think a few hours ago, tweet LA and said, hey, why is LA Late the only one that talks about hazard pay? And tagged like every single network. It's like, why the hell is LA Late the only one that talks about hazard pay? It's like you've all forgot about it and no one talks about it. And I adored that tweet. I really did. I have been very PO'd at reporters and their inability to report the second stimulus package with all its complexities in depth. They just talk about the check and they talk about unemployment benefits. That's all they talk about. They don't talk about anything else. And so you have to dig and see if anyone ever asked Steve Mnuchin this morning, they did not, about hazard pay. If they ever asked Mark Meadows about hazard pay, they did not. If they asked Nancy Pelosi about hazard pay, they did not. If they asked Chuck Schumer about hazard pay, they did not. So you literally have no, tea to read with to sip. You have no cards to read because they're not showing them the cards and asking them to comment on the cards. So we sit here and we clearly don't have anything negative reporting on hazard pay, but we don't have anything positive as well. But the positive focus is really, and this really is great news, so I don't want you to lose faith, is that one, the negotiations are tracking the HEALS, the HEROES Act. I almost said the wrong one. The HEROES Act. It's not tracking the HEALS Act. Two, the White House, which has been the mover of the Republican negotiations, not Mitch McConnell, not the HEALS Act, which, if you don't know, I detailed on Friday, was written by Mitch. It was not written by the president, has been to protect American citizens, pay American citizens, compensate American citizens, and keep them in the home. That's been the message of the president as to the other parts of the stimulus package. So for him to come out and suddenly say tomorrow morning, oh, I'm not paying hazard pay, thank you so much for working the front lines, now go home and have a donut, it doesn't sound like the president. It really doesn't, because it would not be consistent with his policies. Now, a lot of you say, hey, I see your comments. A lot of you, aren't happy with how he's treated the situation, but I'm not defending him. But he has been very consistent on what he has said for certain things. He's always said he supports $1,200 or more. You're going to get $1,200 as your check. Even though Mitch tried to give you $500, he's always supported rent eviction moratorium. He says you're going to get rent eviction moratorium, even though Mitch, in his HEALS Act, didn't include rent eviction moratorium. He said he supports $600 a week, even though Mitch, Steve, and Mark are still trying to pitch you on $200. That's just, that's really Mitch's doing, because Mitch originally didn't want to pay you a single penny for unemployment benefits. Remember that craziness? So the president has never been off message on hazard pay, which is really, really, really assuring, because he's the one pushing negotiations on the Republican side. Nancy, on the other hand, Friday made very clear she's not throwing hazard pay by the side. In a quote that we reported on Friday, I'm not going to go over it again, she had a 1 or 2 paragraph quote in broadcast news, and she mentioned hazard pay twice in 3 sentences. So she clearly has it front burner. She doesn't have it on the back burner. It's not halfway out the door. It's not about to be tossed, so far as we see. The other part of the mixture that's really great news is that everyone else who has an interest in the subject matter has been talking up. Whether it's Bernie Sanders or a lot of leading Democrats have really said, you know, you have to give hazard pay. What are we doing here? Why aren't we giving hazard pay? And the optics, which is the perception, the publicity of the situation, is very clear. The president is running a fall campaign against Joe Biden by saying he wants to give more money to police. He wants to give more money for frontline workers. He wants to protect frontline workers. He wants to ensure their workplace is great and it's larger and stronger as opposed to his opponent. Well, as Bernie Sanders says, you can't say that and then not give them hazard pay. You have to be consistent in your message. And I think the president understands that. So there we go. A lot of viewers have asked me a couple questions about hazard pay, so let me explain them. Let me answer some of those in broad scope right now. First, they say, one person said, you haven't done hazard pay as a video in a couple of days. No, we've changed the thumbnail of the hazard pay video. So hazard pay is always every day at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it bears the afternoon's LA Late thumbnail, and it always has hazard pay at the end of the title. Second, people ask, well, I spoke to my employer about hazard pay, and they're this and that and this and that. Ultimately, yes, that's the conversation you should have. One viewer said he showed his employer this video from yesterday and said, here, are you going to apply for hazard pay? Yes, I've been urging you to do that. I've been urging you, whether you are an employee in a very small mom and pop business, or you're an employee at, a 500 employee business, or you're in a union, or you're in a non-unionized workforce, but it's the same industry as someone next door that is unionized, I've told you to have as many conversations with everyone else that's involved. Speak to other employees, speak to your fellow employees, speak to the union representative. If you're not unionized, still speak to the union representative. Say, hey, this is a big subject matter. Because if this bill is passed, your ability to get the money will be impacted by the willingness of your employer to apply for you. What is he talking about? Let me recap, because I've said this before, but it's so important to repeat right now. Hazard pay is applied for by your employer, not by you. And under the Democratic proposal, they don't have to apply if they don't want to. Ultimately, if the entire workforce walks off the job because they didn't apply for hazard pay, I think they would apply for it. I'm not encouraging for you to do, but I'm basically saying, hey, an employer can't not apply for hazard pay for their entire workforce, because that entire workforce is not a bunch of idiots. They're all going to say, hey, we're entitled to all this money. It's not your money. Go get the money from us for the federal government. And if they don't, well, that's how you have to deal with the situation. And ultimately, I want you to think that through in your mind, because I'm not there. I can't go through every permutation scenario for you. And I'm very good in working things out like this. This is what I do with EIDL and SBA loans on this channel. I help people figure out situations, but I can't figure out the dynamics of you and your employer. So what you need to do after watching this video, think to yourself, hey, if that hazard pay passes, I'm an essential worker, and my buddy and my other buddy that all at work together, we're all essential workers, but our boss he's a schmuck. I mean, he doesn't do much of anything. He's very lazy. I never see him. I don't know where he is. What happens if he doesn't apply for hazard pay? What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? Call up your buddy, start having these conversations, because the money is there. It's not a diminishing fund of money, which is important for you to understand. It's not like there's going to be a big rush of money. It's going to disappear. But it's not one of those things you want to sit around and not take care of. You want to take care of it now. You want to have lined up how much money you're entitled to based upon the calculations I've done on this channel, which I'll say shortly right now. Number of hours you work January to the present times $13 an hour. Every hour you worked, I don't care what it is, you'll get $10,000 if you made the threshold and you made less than $100,000 last year. If you aren't at the threshold, you get a check for what you're at, and then you get $13 an hour going forward. $5,000 is the threshold if you made over $100,000 last year. It qualifies for every job that's essential worker, whether you had 2 or 3 or 4, or whether you're fired or laid off or anything of the sort. You get the money. Get those conversations started, because I don't know what's going to happen. It's very possible. It's very, very possible, if this bill gets passed, that this channel could start turning into an EIDL version of hazard pay, where I'm trying to help you apply for hazard pay through your employer, trying to get your employer to apply. I just don't know, but I hope I don't have to do that for you. I hope the employers apply for you based upon my empowerment of you with information. A lot of stuff for you to grasp there. Do you still do hazard pay videos? Yeah, I do. And this was one of them. Coming up after this is FPUC, big movements, big negotiations, a lot of trash talking, which we love on a Sunday afternoon, except usually we prefer it on the NFL football field and not in politics. And coming up later after that on Afternoons LA, rent assistance and eviction moratoriums. Stay positive, stay motivated, stay smiling, and stay with LA for more.